After ignoring the China threat for years, House Democrats finally introduced a bill that is allegedly tough on China. They call it the American Competes Act, but make no mistake, it's a bill that concedes to China. The American Concedes Act is Democrats' desperate answer to their string of self-created crises. While it contains some provisions supported by Republicans, Speaker Pelosi is holding these good ideas hostage by using this 3,000-page bill as a vehicle for the party's far-left agenda. Almost every page of Democrats' Concede Act has a provision that helps China but hurts America. Now, I know 3,000 pages is a lot to read, and my friends may not always get the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to read it before they vote on it. So I want to take an opportunity here to actually give you some of the pages and what it actually does. Now, here are just a few excerpts. On page 1689, it provides a new unlimited green card program for the Chinese Communist Party to exploit. It also allows research funds to freely flow to colleges and universities that host Confucius Institutes, which are essentially CCP propaganda centers that literally censor our colleges and campuses. These policies would make our nation more vulnerable to Chinese espionage. In fact, the threat of Chinese spying in America is so widespread that the FBI has 2,000 active cases. Think about that, 2,000, almost as many pages as this bill is. To counter it, and they open a new case every 12 hours. So as we debate this bill for the next few days, there's going to be 6 new cases open. I mean, I wonder what they would do. How far would the Chinese spy? I've watched a lot of Hollywood movies. I don't know. Could you imagine, would they go as far and as deep to even meet somebody and spy on them when they're in the city council? Would they develop a friendship through a college, like we see here, Confucius? Maybe even help if the city council person wanted to run for Congress. Go as far if this person even won for Congress and they had developed this long relationship that they met at a college to offer to put people in their office, to help them work in that office, be interns. It would be good. Could it go this far that this person that got elected to Congress, maybe just in their second term to get on one of the most influential committees in the Intel Committee, could they go that far? And if this person got on the Intel Committee with the FBI opening up cases every 12 hours, they would probably warn leadership here about that, I would imagine, because they wouldn't know. But if leadership was warned about it instantly, that member probably would not be on a committee where they could hear the most secrets that members here don't get to know. Surely that person would not still be on that committee. And I don't know if this is Hollywood or not. What if that member even wanted to run for president after that? That would be shocking to me. Probably too Hollywood. Couldn't be true. Couldn't happen in today's world. But I don't know. The FBI has 2,000 active cases, and they open a new one every 12 hours. So what are you doing to stop that? Oh, we're going to help them. We're going to give them more money, give them a green card program. Because I'm sure when the FBI warns of the next, maybe that person could even become a subcommittee chair on the Intel Committee. That couldn't happen in America. I just know with no new leadership, it won't be allowed. On page 995, it requests a toothless report from the Biden administration on the origins of COVID. Instead of taking action to get a real accountability, it's going to ask them for a report. Now, this leadership could open a lot of select committees. They do that quite often. Why don't we have a select committee on the origins of COVID? You know, I know we're going to debate this bill for a couple days, and today I just got a notice we were going to have a memorial this week on the steps of the Capitol like we've had before because 900,000 Americans have now died because of COVID. That got postponed. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if you know why it was postponed. It was postponed because we were debating this bill and we didn't want to put them together at the same time. I'm not sure of that. I don't know. But it's a question I would wonder. But the bigger question I would wonder is, instead of just sitting out there and giving a moment of silence, why wouldn't we give them more time to explain why those 900,000 in America died, let alone the millions around the world where it originated from? Don't you think that'd be better use of our time? I know with the new leadership, we will have that committee. On page 1396, it directs the American military to train to combat climate change. How does that compete? I always thought the American military would be trained to defend America, to protect America. But lo and behold, this Congress, on page 1396, is going to direct the American military to train to combat climate change. I know if the leadership in this Congress was different, that would not be in there. On page 1645, this is very important for competing. It creates a coral reef task force. Because, you know, a coral reef task force, somebody can cut themselves, but 900,000 Americans can die because of COVID, but you can't have a task force on that to know where it originated from. But boy, if anybody gets hurt with coral reef, we got the task force right here in this bill. That is going to make America compete like no other country can. No other country. Okay, let's go to page 227. It creates a new federal program to study plumbing. To study plumbing. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you we don't need any new program to study plumbing. If anybody here wants to study plumbing, I know Mark Wayne Mullen will give you a class day in and day out. Nobody's finer. He's proven it. But this is going to make America compete. 900,000 Americans can die, but you're not going to do anything about understanding where the origin was created. We're getting spied on every single day, all the way down to city council. But we're not doing anything there. We're actually going to fund it and let them do more. But boy, when it comes to coral reefs and plumbing, we're going to excel. And on page 1392, it gives $8 billion. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine $8 billion? How do we get $8 billion? We take it from the taxpayer. How does the taxpayer get $8 billion? They wake up in the morning, they work. They're paying more for gas. They're paying more for their milk, for their eggs, for their breakfast. They're paying more for the masks they got to put on their kids if their kids' school is even open. They earn less because inflation hits them every day. But what we're going to do is take more of their money. But $8 billion, what would this Congress invest in? Well, they're going to give it to the unaccountable UN Green Climate Fund. Now, what have they done with this fund? Where does this money go? Because if it's really worthy, I'm sure the American taxpayer would offer $8 billion more for this Congress to decide where they should be able to send that so their kids can't enjoy maybe a day at Disneyland or somewhere else, or simply to be able to pay their electricity bill that continues to rise. Well, the UN is very, very accountable for this because they've already funneled $100 million to China. So how does the Competes Act do anything to China but provide them more money? But whose money are they providing? You're taking it from the hardworking American taxpayer to give to China through the UN. And maybe they could buy more solar panels and batteries made by the slave labor in China, but paid for by the American taxpayer. I don't think that does much to help us to compete. Not at all. Now, Republicans have offered amendments to prevent China from using that money. It seems like it'd be an easy vote, wouldn't you think, Mr. Speaker? I think it would be hands down. I mean, I would really be interested, Mr. Speaker, in who in this body have constituents that have raised their hand and says, I will give you $8 billion of my hard-earned taxpayer money so you could send it to the UN for the Green Fund that has given China $100 million. I'd like to know that district. Because we offered the amendment to stop it, but you know what's so interesting? There's got to be at least 218 districts that want to do that because it failed. The Democrats said no. And you're in the majority. So it had to be your districts. And I'm not sure if any of you have taken a poll on that, but maybe I'm wrong. Mr. Speaker, all of these far-left policies would make America more vulnerable. We might be stronger in the coral reef, but everything else we're going to be more vulnerable with when it comes to China. And Democrats have spent this debate defending none of them. Not one, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this week, the Biden White House never mentioned the word China in a letter to the House Democrats urging them to support the American Concedes Act. How is that possible, Mr. Speaker? This is the White House with an administration that has worked closely with this Democrat leadership. And this bill is all based upon, competes, making us stronger against China. The only thing I could think of, Mr. Speaker, is the White House must have read the bill. Because there's nothing in there that actually makes us stronger against China, only weaker. So I guess they didn't want to mention it. And now Democrats seem to be pivoting to talking about the economy. Oh, you should be so proud of what you've done to the economy, because you have changed it drastically. It looks worse today than it did 1 year ago. And Mr. Speaker, you know, 1 year ago, it's just past the 1-year anniversary of one-party rule. So I'm not sure you could blame other people for it. You can show what you accomplished. Some have even said that this $320 billion will help reduce inflation. That's deja vu all over again. Remember, Mr. Speaker, when we were on this floor? And lo and behold, it became a moment in time where no longer did we want to do anything bipartisan when it came to COVID, because now you had the Senate, you had the White House, so I guess you think you didn't need to do that. And so you came up with this great idea to spend almost $2 trillion. And you know what, Mr. Speaker, I can't blame you, because it is kind of similar to this bill. Title it COVID, but only spent 9% on it. Spend $2 trillion and we come to the floor and we debate, but we actually warn you. And there was moments and times I thought, should we warn you or should we not? But I care too much about the country. There's too much pain. That if you make this bill go through and you spend the $2 trillion, you are going to create inflation, a tax on every single American. Oh, no, 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 you said. And lo and behold, a year later, we were right again. Don't make the same mistake twice. Don't bring a bill that even the president won't mention China. And don't lie to the American public that it's going to make us stronger. So, Mr. Speaker, if you're talking about the coral reef bill, go right ahead. Go right ahead. It's not a surprise that Democrats want to change the subject. Unfortunately, China is not waiting around for us to act. The real threats we face should remind all of us about the importance of leading by example and putting America first. That starts with taking the threat of China seriously. Mr. Speaker, I believe personally the two greatest threats to the future of this country is the size of our debt and China. No matter what you study in history, every great society that overextends themselves collapses. Mr. Speaker, we have a $30 trillion debt, larger than our economy. And you're here wanting to take more money to give to the UN, to give to China. You want to take more money to study plumbing. We all know water goes downhill. You want to take more money to study coral reef, and you want to tell the American public we're going to be hard, we're going to be better, we're going to be able to compete. You know, I don't sit here just to criticize because I've tried to work to do it together to make it better. House Republicans have tried to work with Democrats on important issues. 3 years ago, I remember traveling to the 75th anniversary of Normandy. Unbelievable location. I remember a lot of the members went together. I went with Speaker Pelosi. I remember walking through the cemeteries. You look at those headstones, from the Star of David to the cross. All the names were young men who died all about the same age and close in proximity, and all died in about the same time frame. As you reflect on their life, you begin to reflect in a position that we currently serve. What action could have been done that day never had to take place? And it wouldn't be a week before, a month before, it'd be years before. What position, what policy could we have done then as a country that D-Day didn't have to take place? In doing so, as I pondered this, as we were sitting on foreign soil and we were watching American lives that gave the ultimate sacrifice with the Speaker and others, and knowing what I think about our debt in China, I asked the Speaker, could we create a committee, a select committee, make it an equal number of Republicans, an equal number of Democrats, so politics is out of it, to focus on really making America compete, but compete against China, from our critical minerals, from our medical supplies and others, that we could have a real plan that could come out united as one. Now, I didn't give up. I worked on it for like 8 months. Talked to the majority leader, Steny Hoyer, and I will tell you, we finally came to agreement, and the answer was yes. I was so excited. We worked on who would we appoint. We wanted to make it right. We worked hard on it. Even came back, and when the Democrats said it had to be a smaller committee, I said, okay, I'll make it smaller just so we can do it. In February 2020, a joint release was ready to go out. This is how far we came. I don't know if you know the reporter Josh Rogan with Washington Post. We even brought him in to interview the members of Congress that were going to be appointed to this committee so we could have a story about it. That's how close we were. But just as that press release was ready to hit the button to go, at the time, on 2/24, the Chairman Engel staff said some small things had to be changed. On March 18th, the early days of China coronavirus outbreak and the cover-up came out. A study published in March indicated that if Chinese authorities had acted 3 weeks earlier than they did, the number of cases could have been reduced by 95%. I'm sure that committee could have found a lot of that. In May 7, 2020, the Washington Post wrote, GOP to launch China Task Force, because I wanted the Democrats to stay with us. We had the reports, we had the names, we had everything, but they said no. They said no. 3 years ago, they said no. This select committee was not going to study the coral reef, was not going to study plumbing, was simply going to focus on how does America compete for the future? What do we need to compete against China? That's all we were going to do. We were not going to take $8 billion and give it to the UN to give to China. We weren't going to do any of that. So we went ahead without you. That was May 7th. 1 week later, Mr. Speaker, on May 14th, the Speaker of this House, Pelosi, I quote, Trump's focus on China is an interesting diversion. An interesting diversion. Think about where we are today and if we had acted back then. Today, Mr. Speaker, Speaker Pelosi says, the only thing is GOP may not want the president to have a victory, which is a sad statement on their part because this is really a jobs issue and a national security issue. Well, I'm not sure, because in reading the bill, it's a jobs issue. I guess she takes that from the plumbing study. A national security issue. I guess making our military trained against climate change. But why couldn't we have done that 3 years ago? To have a real committee. You know, 3 years ago, the bipartisan talks for the China task force, it did take me a year. But unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi walked away. Luckily for America, the House Republicans started the task force anyways. And we quickly delivered hundreds of specific recommendations that addressed every part of the China threat. There wasn't one bill on plumbing or one bill on the coral reef. In October of 2020, our China task force released something no Congress in history has done before, a comprehensive blueprint to guide our response to China. I'm proud that it is the most thorough report on China in the history of Congress. And I'm proud that it's bold, achievable, and realistic. It identifies the threat of the communist China. It doesn't reward them with money. 2/3 of those recommendations are bipartisan, and 1/3 have already passed the House or the Senate. And we did not stop there. On the issue of COVID, perhaps the greatest offense China has committed, House Republicans offered 8 reasonable solutions to achieve justice for Americans and to hold China accountable, including relocating the Olympics from Beijing. Mr. Speaker, those opening ceremonies are going to be quite interesting. President Xi and President Putin probably going to be arm in arm. I don't know, we might be arm in arm. I don't know the exact day we're going to go out to pay tribute to the 900,000 Americans who died from COVID. More in the last year than the year before. No select committee here to study the origins of it. Wouldn't you want to know? None of those families can sue the people who created it. That was one of the recommendations. I kind of think that would be common sense. I kind of think we both could get to the same place. Meanwhile, House Democrats picked this week of all weeks to finally put a weak bill that requests moving the games. Yeah, if you wait to that very last day, I bet you could do it then. 2 days before they begin. Frankly, it's too little and too late. I bet you China laughs just like they laugh at this bill. The actions of the majority tell you all you need to know about who they truly want to help. Themselves, their corporate allies, and the Chinese Communist Party. Mr. Speaker, I do not know what the Communist Party has on the majority party here, but it must be powerful. It must be powerful. To be that close to have a select committee, to have the reporter already written the story to get pulled away, to have 900,000 American lives taken, and you move the date. I don't know why, but could it be this bill at this time? There's nothing in this bill to study the origins. There's nothing in this bill to give those families the right to be compensated for the life they lost. But there is money in here for China. There is money in here to give more green cards. There is money in here where the institutes could be continued. Mr. Speaker, I implore my colleagues to take some time and think deeply about what our country stands for. It certainly isn't this political stunt by the majority. Mr. Speaker, I'll never question somebody's patriotism. The only thing I ask is if you were there on the 75th anniversary of Normandy and you walked through and you read those names, and you ever wondered what could have been done beforehand, I think you would know this is not the right path. And I would hope you'd have the political courage to say so. And I would hope you'd have the will to vote no. Not because your political life depends on it, because America's future depends on it. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida.